Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most bizarre, absolutely chaotic, and honestly surprisingly resilient internet subcultures out there. Seriously, buckle up, because let's just dive right into this.
So what exactly happens when your operating system throws a tantrum? Well, we're going to answer exactly that. We are exploring a highly specific, deeply fascinating internet rabbit hole. It's a place where that mundane computer software we use every single day suddenly behaves like a petulant child throwing an absolute temper tantrum. It's this wild space where clinical technology just takes on a mind of its own, complete with endless, over-the-top drama.
You see, an OS video is a wild, completely unhinged subgenre of internet animation. Instead of your normal, everyday characters, standard, boring software and operating systems are treated as living, breathing entities. They possess deeply flawed human personalities, they engage in these intense, soap opera-style arguments using distinct, robotic text-to-speech voices, and get this, they forcefully install themselves on innocent victims' computers just to cause absolute havoc. Okay, so here's our boot sequence for today's explainer. We'll look at what an OS video actually is, the formula and tropes, the fake apps and games, how it all ends, some famous archetypes, and finally, the legacy of this whole subculture.
All right, Section 1. What is an OS video? Corporate tools, chaotic results.
Now there's this incredible, almost unbelievable contrast right at the heart of this entire subculture. GoAnimate, the platform that birthed this whole phenomenon, launched back in 2007. And you know what? It was originally designed as a highly clinical drag-and-drop tool for businesses. The goal was simply to help corporate offices create clean, dry HR training tutorials and simple marketing videos without needing to hire an entire animation studio. But internet creators? They quickly realized that these stiff, business-friendly corporate puppets could be completely repurposed. They literally took this polite boardroom software and weaponized it to create absolute, unfiltered chaos.
Moving right along to Section 2, the formula and tropes, the anatomy of chaos.
The plot of almost every single OS video can actually be broken down into a surprisingly strict four-step scientific formula. It always begins with a fake install, right? That's where a troublemaker fools an innocent protagonist into downloading their incredibly malicious custom OS. Then comes the real misery, discovering the bugs. The user actually attempts to use the computer, only to find that literally every single click leads to endless, frustrating glitches. This builds the tension right up to the boiling point, where the user just completely loses their mind, screaming at the screen. And finally, they desperately try to reinstall their original system, which, you guessed it, almost always results in the total explosive destruction of the hardware.
These animations rely heavily on a deeply bizarre set of recurring tropes. And honestly, part of the genius is just how rigidly creators stick to them. The dialogue is driven by these robotic voice synthesizers that fans absolutely love. The protagonist will usually open a video by blissfully declaring, "Oh, OS name, how I love you so," right before tragedy strikes. Then you have the troublemakers. They're often literally preschool baby show characters whose names the AI hilariously mispronounces, like calling Caillou, and they'll rapidly repeat "no, no, no" when they finally get caught. And when they get angry, well, they use the platform's default cheerful dance animations to convey intense rage, usually accompanied by deafening, high-pitched digital screeches. It is a lot.
That brings us to Section 3, fake apps and games, a malicious user interface.
You know, the sheer creativity of this malicious user interface is exactly what drives the protagonist completely insane. The victim is basically forced to navigate these incredibly frustrating fake apps designed purely to torture them. Just imagine opening up the standard Paint app only for it to instantly crash on a single click, or straight up refuse to give you any colors. You open Notepad to complain, but the system only allows you to type one single letter before freezing. You try to go online for help? Forget about it, the browser's completely restricted. But the absolute worst is the Get Money app. It's this fake game that actually drains the user's real-life funds, making the characters sob uncontrollably about how their parents are going to ground them for 1,000 years.
Let's jump into Section 4, how it all ends, the reinstall or destruction.
So, after enduring all of that digital torture, the protagonist, who's usually yelling at the troublemaker through a harsh robotic voice dubbed Kitteroo or Scary, magically uncovers an end or uninstall button. But pressing this button is the ultimate heart-pounding gamble. It's a total flip of the coin. It either miraculously deletes the troublemaker's OS and restores the computer to perfect working order, or it triggers a catastrophic world-ending bug. In that scenario, the computer literally catches fire and explodes, physically destroying the operating system and ending the video in a massive blaze of 8-bit glory. No in between.
And here we are at Section 5, famous archetypes, personified software.
If we look at some of the most famous example videos in the community, creators actually project surprising emotional depth onto specific software, turning them into highly recognizable archetypes. In these prime example videos, you're going to constantly see Windows XP framed as this exhausted, overworked, nostalgic veteran who just wants some peace and quiet. And invariably, XP ends up facing off against Windows 10, who is written as this aggressively domineering corporate leader. By using these specific archetypal personas, creators take what should be a mundane technical compatibility issue and turn it into a legendary soap opera screaming match that can literally span a 20-minute video.
Visually, these example videos rely heavily on a beloved legacy format known as Comedy World. And it is so surreal to watch because you have these incredibly clean corporate vector art assets acting out the most unhinged dramatic storylines imaginable. The troublemakers and the personified systems are often original characters or even imported preschool baby show characters rendered in this highly specific style. It draws visual parallels to popular adult cartoons, making the chaotic scenarios of computers exploding and operating systems crying even more jarring and, frankly, absolutely hilarious to witness.
Finally, Section 6. Summary and Conclusion. The Legacy of the Subculture. The climax of this entire subculture happened around 2016, and honestly, it's a massive testament to internet resilience. GoAnimate suddenly announced they were completely abandoning Flash for HTML5, and in doing so, they retired older, cartoony themes like Comedy World to focus strictly on a modern, professional look, eventually rebranding the entire company to Viant in 2018. Well, the OS video community was absolutely devastated. Their tools were just gone. But instead of giving up, the massive backlash led fans to do something incredible. They literally banded together and rebuilt the old video maker from the ground up. They created an offline tool called Wrapper Offline, painstakingly storing the retired platform entirely on their own hard drives, just to save their memes and ensure the OS video genre would never, ever die.
Digital culture analyst Dr. Elena Rostova perfectly explains why this level of dedication actually matters in the grand scheme of the internet. Beneath all the absurdity, the fake apps, and the screaming robotic voices, this platform gave anyone, regardless of skill level, the absolute power to tell their own stories. You didn't need to know how to draw a single frame, and you didn't need to hire voice actors. It was the ultimate democratization of animation. If a teenager had a bizarre, highly specific story about a legacy operating system seeking revenge against a baby show character, they could fully animate it in an afternoon and share it with a community of thousands. It just goes to show that even the most clinical, soulless technology can take on a vibrant life of its own when handed to a creative community. It's become this humorous, deeply nostalgic way for a whole generation to process their relationship with the screens they stare at every single day. So I leave you with this final lingering thought. If a mundane corporate tool meant for boring HR training can spark over a decade of passionate, absurd storytelling and inspire fans to literally rebuild it from scratch, what other forgotten software has a little bit of soul just waiting to be unlocked? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and stay curious.